Okay guys, any of you that's seen some of my other videos on tractor logging and firewood cutting, you know that I've been involved with forestry for a large part of my life. My father, my grandfather before me back, well, I'm the 6th generation on this property, and forestry has always played a big part in our family. I want to talk to you a little bit today on this video about sustainable forestry. Now, industrial forestry has led us to believe over the years that the only way to work a piece of ground is to clear cut that ground, plant it to a solitary crop, a monocrop situation, using herbicides or spacing saws to cut out any competing vegetation that comes up in the plantation, and they harvest the plantation at 30-40 years and then plant again with a monocrop situation again. I'm going to swing the camera around here and I'm going to show you a little bit of what we've got going on here now. This particular piece of ground, with the exception of the fact that it did suffer from a blowdown back in the I believe the early 70s. There was a hurricane through here, knocked quite a bit of lumber down. This ground has been harvested in the past 100 years about 15 times by my father, my grandfather, and myself. Just going to swing the camera around here now, let you take a look at what's here for existing vegetation. Okay, here we see some evidence. There's a stump that, probably one that my father cut. I would say it's rotted down a bit too much to have been one of mine. Some other stumps here showing some cuts over the past 30 years. I would say there's a chance that one there might be one of my stumps. We get a nice little stand of spruce trees coming up out of the stump itself. But if you start and swing the camera around, you see the kind of lumber that we grow. Got a spruce tree here, probably 18 inches on the stump. There's probably 3 saw logs in this tree. A couple of 16-footers and probably a 12 up there on the top. Bring the camera on around here. You get some other decent sized lumber here. Now, to industrial forestry, this particular piece of ground would be what they would consider a wasteland because of the number of hardwood that we've got coming up in here. Now, sure, we've got lots of nice sized spruce. There's another good one right there. A little bit of a wind shake down it, but still a big tree. The kind of lumber that you don't see a lot on private land anymore. Definitely not on the Crown Forest, the government-owned properties, for the simple fact that industrial forestry doesn't look for a big tree like this anymore. They want a tree that's 12 inches, 16 inches maximum on the stump. They don't want them big old spruce like that. Now, we've got some spruce on some of our properties here. We've got in the range of several hundred acres. We've got spruce here that are over 30 inches on the stump. We've got white pine that would exceed that size by quite a bit. But the reason that I say that industrial forestry would consider this a wasteland is because we don't have a single spruce tree every 8 feet. And we've got these, hardwood. Everywhere you look here, hardwood. Now, there's an advantage to them hardwood in my eyes. This particular tree right here, because of the limbs onto it, a little crotch up in there, it's got kind of a spall here on the butt, maybe some damage when the tree was quite small. That tree will never make a veneer stick. It will never make a saw log for sawing out, making plywood or hardwood lumber. But what it will make is first-class firewood. Furthermore, those leaves in that canopy There's a reason now, we're in what they call the Acadian forest on the east coast of Canada. There's a reason for them leaves. Those leaves help to neutralize the acid in the soil and build up the nutrient level here on the ground level. Now if you remove all of the hardwood from a stand of lumber like this, the softwood, eventually the softwood start to suffer. Now, I've talked to a gentleman from Sweden actually some years ago that told me that years ago when they started clear cutting in Sweden, they got into a situation, they cut ground, they planted it, they cut it again for pulpwood, planted it the second time, cut it again, and eventually they got to a situation where they found the plantations weren't growing. And when the biologist went in and studied the soil, looked at the canopy, the cover, the vegetation that was available, their findings was that those hardwood leaves right there is necessary to a forest, to maintain a healthy forest. Without those, to neutralize the soil's the acid, to add nutrient to the soil every year, the soil was dying. Now it's an easy thing to go into a piece of forest and leave those hardwood standing, or harvest a certain amount. Now, just looking around here, I've got some trees here that I'm going to be taking out over the next couple of weeks. I got one right here, crotched from the stump, two trees growing together. That'll never make a saw log, it'll never make a veneer stick, but it's fine firewood. I'll be taking that out, opening up some space for the sun to get in here. Here's another old gnarly one right here. Sure, there's not much of value in that tree, but that tree has put a lot of leaves on the ground in the past 20-30 years, and now I'll be taking that out as a crop tree. To industrial forestry, they'd knock that tree over, leave it laying on the ground, trample it. The machines, the big tracked machines that they use, the processors, a lot of this stuff is just trash in their eyes. But here in New Brunswick, we have suffered a major collapse of the deer herd over the past 10-12 years. And the reason for that being, the deer are starving to death. Because when you create a monocrop forest of hundreds and thousands of acres of nothing but spruce and pine trees, the spruce and pine provide cover for the deer, shelter from the wind, a place to get in out of the eyes of predators, but they don't provide food. Those hardwood is what provides food. And when we go into a piece of ground and we cut, the first thing that we see the second year after cutting is thousands of little sprouts of hardwood shooting up from the ground, coming up out of the stumps of the trees that have been cut. And the first thing you'll see is piles of deer scat everywhere. They come in there, they'll feed down all those little limbs, browse on that stuff at night time, clean a lot of those little shoots right down to the stem, and there won't be hardly a leaf left. That's what they live on. And by allowing industrial forestry to come in and destroy these hardwoods simply because they don't view them as a crop species, we're doing a great disservice to nature. This piece of ground, even though industrial forestry would look at this and say that it's not worth much, this piece of ground is worth thousands of dollars when you consider the value to the deer. Now, if I was to pan the camera around here on the ground, there's deer tracks, there's moose tracks, there's just out the way here I've seen a set of bear tracks passing through. There's squirrels, little varmints, voles, mice here everywhere. There's a great population of birds in this. You get the fur bearers in here, the martins, fisher, foxes, bobcat. In this mixed growth forest, it's a living, breathing ecosystem that nurtures everything that's in it. And That's what industrial forestry wants to take away from us. Now this piece of ground right here, just looking around, there's probably, to the acre, I would venture a guess there's 2 to 3 cord of firewood that is just in the trees that I'm going to weed out of this. I'm still going to leave a lot of this stuff, like this spruce here. The spruce is probably 12 inches on the stump. It's still growing healthy. There's a good crown on it. That tree won't be cut for another probably 20 years at least. I like to see a spruce tree have at least a couple of saw logs in it before I'll cut it down. There's another spruce tree right over there, growing very well. Trees like that don't need to be cut just because they're here. Now there's some forestry contractors who would come in here and they would level this. They would take every softwood on this ground. But the thing is, if you take them all off, what's left for seed? What's left for the future? We're not the only generation that's on this property. And that's the way that my family has always worked it. We always leave something for the next generation. And if I come in and cut this and leave behind a field of stumps, I'm doing a disservice to my children, the future grandchildren, not only to the environment and the wildlife that exists here. Somewhere along the way, hopefully someday, somebody will talk some common sense into government, into forestry companies, and they'll start to see the value in the ecosystem as a whole, rather than just as a dollars in the pocket kind of thing. There's a stump there that it's probably my father cut that, maybe my grandfather. And someday my boys will be leaving stumps here in the woods, but I can guarantee you we won't be leaving any clear cuts. There'll always be something left behind. That's the way we do it sustainably here on the farm. Thanks for watching.